It is 4 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I sort of find myself hovering around the same question from various different angles. It's a variation on the theme of how do you deal with people who believe things that aren't true? Because the effort they put into believing things that aren't true is superhuman. We'll talk a little later this morning to Fraser Knight, who was chased essentially out of Birmingham by a group of Asian men last night who were fearful of the kind of riots and attacks that we've seen in lots of other parts of Great Britain in recent days arriving on their doorstep. There'd been warnings bubbling all day that was going to happen. The response utterly unacceptable, borderline criminal. And footage of those moments will be used by the racist liars to claim that there is some sort of balance, that the people looting shops, setting fire to hotels full of human beings, attacking our police, endangering the lives of not only themselves and everybody around them, but also police officers and entirely innocent bystanders, kicking in the doors of Asian families who have committed the crime of being brown. There'll be attempts by the racist liars responsible for the riots that we're seeing at the moment, the Farage riots, as you might like to call them. There'll be desperate attempts to claim that the appalling behaviour of some Asian men in Birmingham last night is somehow... In fact, if I turn to my inbox now, there'll be people saying, I bet you won't be talking about that, will you? But of course I will, because I am not a racist liar. I'm neither racist nor a liar, which puts me in direct opposition to people like Nigel Farage and Tommy Ten Names and the bloke out of Lewis who wasn't Lewis. Bizarrely, a Daily Mail columnist today turns on the last two for spreading their evil bile, which is about as close to the quintessence of irony as it is possible to get. So how do you deal with people who believe things that aren't true? Almost every inquiry into the Metropolitan Police Service in recent years has found them to be institutionally racist. But Nigel Farage comes out and speaks undiluted bilge about them somehow coming down harder on white people than they do on non-white people, referencing non-existent problems with the policing of Black Lives Matter's protest march during the middle of lockdown when coronavirus restrictions were in place. And it's such a tired routine now. Farage says something the racists love. They know it's not true. He certainly knows it's not true, but they don't care. The racists love it. And then some complete Charlie on Sky News stops the Metropolitan Police Commissioner and asks a variation on the question, when did you stop beating your wife? You ask someone, are you going to stop two-tier policing, which doesn't exist? Then you are asking a question based on the premise that it does. Absolutely appalling. 8 minutes after 10 is the time. So there are various countries that we're living in at the moment, all at the same time. There's one where you are fearful of having your community torched tonight or tomorrow, or indeed where your community has already been torched. I mean, that is really the crucible of the current crisis, that there are people... I was struck yesterday by our first caller from up in Rotherham, just talking about his normal Monday morning routine would be to do the big shop at the Aldi that was over the road from the hotel that the racist rioters set fire to. And it was confirmed, of course, by the Times journalist who was there, that they had attempted to block one of the fire escapes with burning bins. I just stop and think about that, you know? So that's one country. Some people listening to this program live in that country. They live in a part of the country where their community has already been set on fire by terrorists. And there will be people listening to this program who live in parts of the country that are currently fearful of being next. It could be my part of the country next. And then there are people who, by dint of their ethnicity or their religion, are fearful of being personally victimised. I heard a 17-year-old girl being interviewed on the radio this morning whose door, I literally, they locked all the doors, locked all the windows, moved upstairs, closed all the curtains, closed all the blinds, and stood impotently by while these racist rioters smashed their car up because they knew that the family inside was brown. The car, incidentally, would have been used by her mother. that night to travel to the home of the disabled girl that she is a carer for, but she couldn't go because the car had been written off. Such was the violence of the attack. They tried to kick the door in. Happily, they failed. They smashed the window above the door, and the family were cowering upstairs. I just want you to stop, especially, and I listen, you know how naive and idealistic I am. I still think I can reach you. Otherwise, I wouldn't come to work every day. I still think I can reach you if you're sitting there polishing your racist lies, polishing your picture of Tommy Ten Names or Nigel Farage. I still think I can reach you because I want you to imagine what it would be like if that was your family. Right, we've all closed the curtains, darling. Pull down the blinds. Everybody upstairs. Be quiet. Keep your head down. Watching on social media, watching on TikTok as this rampaging mob arrives at the top of your street, baying for your blood, shouting out the name of your God in the most pejorative of terms. And then you turn on your radio and you find some complete Charlie claiming that it's not Islamophobic. Attacking a mosque is not Islamophobic. I heard some of this yesterday. I don't know whether you did. Just run it by me how attacking a synagogue isn't anti-Semitic, and then we can talk about how attacking a mosque is not Islamophobic. But you're watching them on TikTok. They're at the bottom of your street. And they're coming for you because you're Irish, because you're Welsh, because you're white. Just get under the bed. Get under the bed, darling. You're watching them on TikTok. I heard an interview with a shopkeeper. Reckoned he was about 10 seconds away from not getting the shutters down in time to keep the rioters out, heading for his shop because he's a Muslim. But it's not Islamophobic. Oh, and by the way, there's two-tier policing because if the Muslims were setting fire to hotels, then they'd all be arrested. Or no, they wouldn't be. They wouldn't. No, they would. If the Muslims committed crimes that they haven't committed, they wouldn't. Two-tier policing. Unbelievable. And I used the word pogrom yesterday, and I wondered whether I was exaggerating. But what I've just described to you was, in many ways, akin to hiding from the Nazis in the Second World War. Close all the windows, lock all the doors, get under the beds and hide. The only difference, I suppose, is that those families couldn't watch the crystal-necked rioters marching up their streets on phone screens, praying that it wouldn't be their door next. But just stop and think, what if that was your family? Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Legitimate Concerns. What if that was your family hiding from this mob? And then ask yourselves what you think of the mob. But remember, it's your family that they're coming for because they've got legitimate concerns. They can't tell you what they are, or if they do, it's all lies. Oh, these immigrants get free cars. These asylum seekers get free houses. They steal our jobs and take all our benefits. It's all nonsense. Just imagine it was your family they were coming for. Now tell me what you think of the mob. Oh, they're just good working class people who've been pushed too far. Yeah, they're coming for your family. Yeah, all right, they're not. They're scum and they need to be jailed immediately. In fact, I can't believe it's even... No, they're coming for your family. Yeah, sorry, they're not good patriots. They're evil scum. They're terrorist scum. And they're attacking the police. What's it like to be the partner of a police officer? What's it like to be the partner of a police officer? Knowing that the people trying to hurt your husband or your wife are claiming to be patriotic. Acting on the incitements of people who actually sit there in the House of Commons in this country. They're being accused while being attacked, while shielding themselves from petrol bombs and bricks. They're being accused of being biased against the people throwing petrol bombs and bricks at them. And the same lazy journalists who have allowed some of these dreadful provocateurs to achieve positions of awful prominence in our country are doing it all again, falling for it all again. Oh, here's the latest racist lie from Nigel Farage, race-baiting lie from Nigel Farage. Let's have a phone in about whether it's true or not. Nah, let's not, actually. Let's have a phone-in about how much responsibility he bears for what we're seeing. And I focus on him because he's a member of Parliament. You could focus on Paul Dacre, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail, who has published so many front pages, deliberately designed to stoke up precisely the sort of anger that has now spilled over into violence, into terrorism, into murderous, potentially, attacks upon police officers and entirely innocent children. And the innocence of children is how this all began. So what you have now is people claiming that they are showing their disdain for an attack upon innocent children by articulating sympathy and support for people launching attacks on innocent children. The 3 little girls killed in Southport, one of whom, I think crucially, the daughter of immigrants. The 3 little girls killed in Southport by a British-born man. So outraged are these people by that crime. So, too outraged to realise that the lies that prompted their initial response about him being an asylum seeker have done nothing to dampen their rage, because their rage had nothing to do with him being an asylum seeker and everything to do with him being black. British, black, British. Like so many of the athletes that are running at the Olympics at the moment and carrying our hopes and dreams on their shoulders, unless you've fallen for the spiel of the racist liars. So what you have now is people who claim to be articulating disgust at the attack, the murderous attack on innocent children, articulating their disgust by trying to set fire to a hotel containing innocent children. You see why I spend so much time wondering about whether it's possible to reach these people, whether there are any changeable minds in this crucible. What's that you say? You're attacking a hotel full of children. Why? Well, because someone attacked some children. A black man murdered some children. So you're attacking children? Yeah. I'm patriotic. I've got legitimate concerns. I don't know how it plays out. I don't know how it ends, but I do know it keeps getting worse until the people responsible are held to account. Whether the people responsible, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's Nigel Farage, whether it's Tommy Ten Names on his sunbed in Cyprus, whether it's the lad from Lewis who wasn't Lewis, spewing his barely literate bile on social media. These are the people telling the rioters that they are justified. They are entitled to do what they do. Spreading the conspiracy theories in Farage's case, and then a few days later expressing mealy-mouthed regret and condemnation of the rioters who, I saw one wearing a T-shirt with his name on it. Maybe not a rioter, maybe just a protester, which I do think is an important distinction to make. So what is the point? Then you've got Lee Anderson literally posting lies about a hotel being full of asylum seekers. In the week that hotels full of asylum seekers were set on fire, one of the 80% of Reform Party MPs who haven't been jailed for attacking British women posts lies about a hotel being full of asylum seekers. Turns out it's full of foreign nurses working in the NHS to keep you and your children healthy and safe. Oh, but let's get him on the telly. Let's invite him onto the radio, have a chat about stuff. It's mad, right? I mean, it is just mad. It's a kid killed by a white man with a sword a few months ago. Do you remember that story? You don't, do you? Shall I tell you why you don't remember that story? It's a black kid and a white man had the sword. Where were the riots? But remember, it's got nothing to do with race or religion, and it's definitely not Islamophobic. Whew. And, of course, you're right, and I'm wrong when you point out to me you shouldn't say a black man killed 3 white girls. It was a boy. It was a 17-year-old boy. But you know that the colour of his skin is the most important element in the violence of the rioters, because they are racist terrorists, terrorising communities. The other country that we live in is the one where you're watching it all unfold on the media. You're watching it all unfold on screens, and you're feeling either absolute horror and heartbreak or you're getting off on it. No way of knowing how many people get off on it. How many people get off on it? More than you think. disgusting lies about it being somehow class-based. It's not class-based. It's the racism of the golf club sometimes that we've been tracking on this programme for the best part of 20 years. How many of them are there? How many people are sympathetic? Because, they're not like us, are they? The brown ones and the black ones. Too many of them. Oh, it's only the illegal immigrants that I'm cross about. All right, so it's not the ones that have got houses and jobs then. You're absolutely cool with them because they will be economic migrants. I tell you what, it's a good job they're not waving any Palestinian flags, isn't it? These people setting fire to hotels and trying to brain police officers with bricks. Yeah, did you see the story about the ones trying to tear up gravestones in a Christian church? Trying to tear up gravestones so that they could use the detritus to attack the police? Yeah, but I'm Nigel Farage, so I'm going to condemn the police today. Christian values they're defending by tearing up gravestones to lob at the police. Absolutely extraordinary what we're watching. And the ease with which you can trace these crimes to their source is tragically one in which most of the media can't indulge because they are culpable. They are guilty. Those collages of front pages, particularly from the Mail and the Express, are incitements to riot. They always have been. It might have taken 10 years for the riots to ferment, but they always have been. They're just piling tinder into the room, waiting for the spark. And then it came. And it's not confined to the media, of course, although this Nick Timothy character is now an MP. He was responsible both for the disastrous decision to introduce red lines, which made Brexit the inevitable clown show and disaster that it has been. He was also responsible for Theresa May's disastrous decision to call an election in 2017. But he is the kind of person that the Conservative Party still think that they should be promoting into Parliament, and he wrote an article in January of this year claiming that multiculturalism is becoming a Trojan horse for Islamist domination. That's an incitement to riot. Right there. He sits in Parliament. It's not just Farage. There was a Labour MP yesterday talking about asylum seekers in a hotel in her constituency. Her constituents want the hotel back because everyone who stays in a hotel lives in the area. It's a well-known fact about hotels. I don't know if you've been to any hotels lately, but you'll probably bump into your neighbours. Well, you cross the road because, suitcases are heavy. So why do you want to go far afield on holiday when you can check into a Holiday Inn at the bottom of your own street? So all three parties there. Not the SNP, not the Lib Dems. Why aren't there any riots in Scotland? I might ask you that a little later today. But I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to open the phone lines, and I'm going to see what you want to say. I'm sorry I haven't really asked you any questions, but sometimes I don't need to. It is 25 minutes after 10, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the far-right attack should be seen as terrorism, says an ex-police chief, and that's news, when really it's a bit like describing water as wet. But the reason why we've ended up in such a mess is one that is always worth examining, isn't it? 25 minutes after 10 is the time. Let's start with Aaron, who's in Medway. Aaron, what would you like to say?
Hello there. First time calling, so I'm a little bit nervous. Wish to get my opinion across, really.
Excellent.
It's just the way you're coming across, really, to be fair.
Okay.
Like, you keep saying Tommy Robinson is inciting the violence and everything as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But if you actually read through all his tweets and everything, he's constantly advocated for no violence because that undermines everything. He's constantly been saying, everyone stop the violence because it gives everyone a reason to go against it, kind of thing.
Why did he spread the lies about the Southport killer, do you think?
Well, at the time, no one knew whether it was lies or it was truth.
Yes, they did. He'd already been arrested.
Well, it was no
so
one
the
knew
authorities knew. So why would he spread those lies?
No one had named him at that time, had they?
So why would he spread his name?
Because at the time it was unknown.
But you just said he hadn't been named.
We hadn't been named at the time.
So he spread a made-up name.
Yeah, because it was unknown from everyone.
But why did he do
right
that?
Or who was wrong?
Why did he do that?
Because it was speculation.
But why did he choose a Muslim name to spread?
it could have been any name, you know.
But why was it a
my
Muslim
point-
name
my
then?
point
Why
here-
wasn't it your name? Why didn't he say it's someone called Aaron from Medway? Why did he say it's someone with an Islamic name from who's seeking asylum? Why would he do
Because
that?
you're missing the point here.
I'm asking the questions. Why did he do that?
Well, I don't know. Like, everyone was out speculating everything.
I
whether
wasn't.
It's far right or
I wasn't.
left. You know, some people were out speculating different names and reasons.
I wasn't. But we're talking about him. Why did he do that? Why did he choose? Why did he choose a Muslim name and claim that he was an asylum seeker?
Look, I'm saying
without
saying
any evidence
he's
at all.
sitting on a sunbed.
Without
He's
any
sitting on a
evidence.
sunbed.
Let's not change the subject, Aaron. Let's begin with. You said you wanted to express your opinion. I want to pay you the respect of properly examining them. So he's not inciting anything. Why did he spread a made-up name, claiming it was a Muslim asylum seeker?
Well, lots of different people did.
Yeah, but we're talking about him. So why did he do it if he's not trying to incite anything?
Well, everyone did. You know, everyone.
You can't keep saying these words that don't answer my question. If he's not trying to incite hatred of, let's say, Muslim asylum seekers, why did he claim that a Muslim asylum seeker had committed 3 murders that were done by a British 17-year-old boy?
Okay, so say
a Christian British 17-year-old boy. Why would he choose to lie about a Muslim asylum seeker? You don't think this is an unfair question, do you?
No, I don't think you're
so answer it then.
An unfair question. Well, I think that he would have come out if it was a Christian name.
Can you give me an example of that?
Can
you give me an example of when he's condemned a Christian murderer?
Not off the top of my head, no.
We can't. Well, then we'll have to scratch that from the record. Why did he choose to lie about a Muslim asylum seeker if he's not trying to incite hatred of Muslim asylum seekers?
Because that was the news at the time.
No, it wasn't.
It was. It was sort of all round everywhere on.
It was on racist social media accounts. It wasn't anywhere else. And I think Nigel Farage may have contributed very deliberately to the confusion. But you chose, did you, to believe it, despite there being no evidence? I didn't. Why would you do that?
At the time, yeah.
Why do you think you did that?
I don't know. You know, it's social media. I agree that there is a big problem with social media everywhere.
And where does Tommy Robinson do most of his work? Where does he do?
It's on X.
What?
It's on X, social media.
So that's where the big problem is.
Yeah. But
you're here to tell me he's not part of it.
Well, he hasn't told everyone to go out and loot shops and riot.
No, but he's told people that 3 little girls were murdered by a Muslim asylum seeker, and lo and behold, people are looting shops and rioting and kicking in the doors of Muslims. You don't think there's any link at all there, Aaron?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's right in that, along with a lot of other people. What do you think then?
What do you think then?
What do I think about what exactly?
What do you think about these riots?
I think the violence is completely wrong, you know. It undermines everything they're trying to achieve, or the point they're trying to get
What's the point they're trying to get across?
Yeah, the point we're trying to get, they're trying, we're all trying to get across.
You said we're then, didn't you? Was that just a slip of the tongue?
Yeah, because the mainstream media make people more right-wing, even though it's central.
Right.
You know.
So what's the point? What's the point they're trying to get across?
Do you think it's right that we're spending £6 million a day to house illegal immigrants in hotels while our elderly are going to freeze this winter?
I think that it's a direct consequence of the Conservative Party's decision to stop processing asylum applications, between 70 to 80% of which will be passed once those applications are processed. And if you go to the Home Office website, you can see how the annual cost has risen from millions to billions as a direct consequence of what they have done, because by creating this crisis, they can whip up the kind of hatreds and prejudices that they thought would help them electorally, but of course they miscalculated on what the Reform UK Limited Party would do. And when you say illegal immigrants, you are wrong, because they can't be here illegally until their application has been processed. And as I've just told you, 70 to 80%.
You haven't even got to look in the news.
70 to 80% of the applications prove to be successful. So tell me again what point you think the people throwing smashed up gravestones at British police officers are trying to make.
Well, they're trying to make the point that, you know, enough is enough. Right?
Sorry, enough what?
Too many illegal immigrants, and we stress illegal.
Right. So why are they kicking in the doors of legal Muslims, people that were
That's
born
what
here.
I'm saying. That's completely wrong. Right? That is, you've got idiots in any group. You know, like last night in Birmingham, for example, where you've got Muslims out on the street. You know, you will have wrong people in there that are threatening Sky News presenters.
They didn't threaten Sky News presenters. They swore, and therefore I watched it as well. And I'm a professional broadcaster, and if you don't immediately curtail a broadcast which contains swear words, then you'll get an Ofcom complaint upheld. But I talked at 10 o'clock. Yeah, well, slashing a tyre and attacking a police officer, they're not the same thing, are they? And yet I'd said at 10 o'clock this morning, someone will come on the show today and try to claim that these are somehow equivalent. Let's focus on the point that you think these people are making. They're making the point that there has been too much illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Okay, and you think that watching police officers get attacked, hotels get set on fire and shops get looted will make the mainstream media go, oh gosh, I think there are some people out there who think there's too much illegal immigration. But they don't know what the words illegal immigration actually mean, but they're certain that there's too much of it.
Well, every day we're seeing boats. I mean, I went fishing at Deal the other day, and you can see 3 or 4 boats come over every single day. They're not women and children. They're not fleeing anything. They're fighting middle-aged men.
How do you know they're not fleeing anything? How do you know they're not fleeing anything?
Because they're throwing their passports into the water on their way here to claim illegal asylum.
That's not how it works. That's what they used to do when they were on air. That's what they used to do when they were on aeroplanes. So how do you work out, Aaron, whether they are bona fide asylum seekers or not?
Well, you'd need to go through the proper. At the end of the day, you can't come up on a rubber dinghy.
No, answer the question. Answer the question. How do you find out? Well, talk me through what the legal routes are before you go.
The legal routes are applying properly, isn't it, through visa?
How do you do that?
You can't just rock up on.
Where do you
do
that? Where do you do that?
I honestly don't know because.
But you have to know, Aaron. Do you see why you have to know? Because you're on national radio expressing strong opinions which are built on nothing. Tell me how you apply. Tell me how you apply for asylum in this country.
If I was to turn up on a beach,
just tell me how you do it.
Some other country,
tell me how you do it.
That would be illegal.
Well, how do you think they got to here? They've passed through loads of countries, mate.
Illegally.
Not illegally. They are asylum seekers until their application is processed. So tell me how you apply legally.
I don't know because I'm not an asylum seeker.
But you're so certain that they're bogus. You're so certain that they're fraudulent. You're so certain that they've got loads and loads of other choices. And I ask you what those choices are, and you say...
Well, what are the statistics for the amount of illegal immigrants that have come over here this year?
I've told you that the rough average is between 70 and 80% of applications processed will be found to be valid.
That's too much, you know.
What do you mean that's too much? That's counting. That is saying, are you a genuine refugee? And the answer, after very, very stringent testing now, as a consequence of the political environment that you're part of, the answer comes back, yes, you are a genuine refugee.
Yeah, I don't know. All I'm saying is, you're spreading misinformation.
What misinformation?
The misinformation that everyone that's against illegal immigration is just racist.
Just run me by when I said that.
Earlier, you're constantly just saying,
tell me what I said.
The fascists.
Yeah, the rioters. I'm talking about the rioters and the people that have incited them. I'm against illegal immigration. I think that when people's applications are found to not be valid, they should be removed from the country. So what's the misinformation
so you're
then?
For the Rwanda bill then?
No, those are people whose applications were found to be valid would have been sent to Rwanda or forced to stay in Rwanda.
Send these illegal immigrants? You're saying you want them out the country. Where are we sending them?
It doesn't matter, does it? You send them back to their country of origin because they will be safe there.
Are we doing that?
Well, we'd like to. But we can't because the backlog of process of applications that haven't been processed as a consequence of conservative policy designed to appease people like the rioters and shall we say their fellow travellers has caused a bottleneck that Keir Starmer now has to sort out. So everything you've told, and just before you go, tell me what I've said that's not true.
Well, saying that Tommy Robinson's inciting violence while these riots.
So why did he lie about a Muslim asylum seeker?
Not the start.
That's how the riots started, Aaron. Based on that racist lie, which he was one of the main architects of. Can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
You were wrong about what immigration is. You were wrong about what illegal immigration is. You were wrong about incitement. You were wrong about what Tommy Robinson has and hasn't done. You were wrong about the rioters. You were wrong about my position. You were wrong about misinformation. Every single thing you've said in the last 20 minutes has been utterly unevidenced and wrong. But when we bid each other farewell, in my case, and I'm sure in yours politely, you'll still believe every single thing you believed when you rang me, won't you?
Because I see it with my own eyes, you know?
Yeah.
Like the two-tier policing.
Yeah.
You know, you can't tell me that doesn't exist and it's a myth. We all see it last night.
Right.
You know, we all see it. There was thousands, hundreds of Muslims and lots of other
How many hotels
Asians
did they set fire to?
out on the street?
How many hotels
None,
did they
but
set?
they raided pubs.
How many hotels did they set fire to? How many shops How many shops did they loot?
They raided pubs and took out white people and
Right, you are.
racially
And
attacked them.
you saw this on social media,
Yeah.
which you said 15 minutes ago was the biggest problem in spreading lies and misinformation.
Well, it's not a lie if it's there in front of you. You know, it's just
like the tweet about the Muslim asylum seeker killing those 3 little girls. It's not a lie because it was there in front of you.
Well, no, because this is a video right there in Birmingham,
Right.
and you can see Sky News was there.
I saw
they
that
had
video.
to retreat.
I saw that video. They didn't have to retreat.
Did you see the police in that video?
Okay. So no hotels set on fire, no shops looted, no police attacked, but it's two-tier policing because the people who are looting shops, the people who are setting fire to hotels, the people who are throwing bricks at the police, they're getting collared, and the people who aren't doing any of those things aren't getting collared. Therefore, there must be two-tier policing.
Well, did you see it last night? There wasn't any police on that news report.
Well, how can there be two-tier policing if there aren't any police there, Aaron? Love to the family. It's 10:38. Amelia Cox has your headlines. If it needs explaining, then I will explain it, okay? You see those people over there, right? They wish you harm. Yeah, not just the ones that maybe have done you harm, but all of them, all of the Muslims, all of the brown people, all of the immigrants, all of them. They're all awful. They're all awful. Brown people get attacked. Person who told you they were all awful, person who lied to you about crimes, person who lied to you about conduct and behaviour, throws their arms up in the air and goes, "Oh, I condemn the violence. I condemn the I mean, how stupid, forgive me, but I do use that word advisedly on occasion, how stupid do you have to be to fall for that? Here's loads and loads of racist lies about a certain group of our society. Attacks happen, not just on that group of our society, but also on the police charged with keeping us all safe. And then you throw your hands up in the air and you say, "Oh, I don't like these riots. Down with this violence against the people I've been lying about to violent people." It's extraordinary. And sometimes the way that night follows day, I even after all the years I've been doing this job, say to you that the scenes of Asian men in Birmingham, probably Muslim men in Birmingham, behaving very badly, being cited as somehow a counterbalance to the attempted murder of people in Holiday Inns, the bombardment of police with bricks, petrol bombs, the looting of shops, the terrorising of entire neighbourhoods. And so that's what racism does to you. "Oh, my lot are bad, but, I can't claim the other lot are worse, but I'll claim they're just as bad." Evidence? Got none. Not to justify that kind of equivalence, that kind of false equivalence. Got no evidence of it at all. Someone told you that your area, your street was about to come under attack from the kind of people that we've seen in Rotherham and Tamworth. What would you do? You'd either get out on the streets to resist or you'd hide under your bed. We began the show talking about the people hiding under their bed. A 17-year-old girl interviewed on the BBC this morning who was cowering in the house while these thugs totaled her mother's car, tried to smash in their front door. Or, if you think they're heading for your street, you're determined to resist. And then they use footage of your planned resistance to claim that you're as bad as the people you're preparing to defend your community against. And it unfolds with the easiest The easiest contributions to public discourse, the blue touch paper lighters. Do you think Farage or Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, do you think he'll be visiting any of these people in prison? Offering any help to their families? You'll have to get back to me on that one. 10:47 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What the point you make when you looter Greggs about illegal immigration, sometimes a little bit hard to pin down. So always worth sticking a microphone in front of some of these people and finding out what they think the objection is. One of my particular favourites managed to bring the Titanic into the conversation. I don't know if you've come across this one.
Put it another way, when you got the Titanic and they filled it with too many people, what happened? It sunk. And that's what's happening to England. We're sinking, too many in.
Legitimate concerns. Although, to be fair, while we're having a history lesson, why not bring Native Americans into it?
Early afternoon, hundreds had gathered in Middlesbrough's city centre. Everyone we spoke to condemned the violence, hated the term hard right. They just feel immigration's out of control, opinions forceful, and to many fanciful.
It's our country and we're getting pushed out. I understand how the Native Indians felt in America now, because that's what the white man did, went and pushed them out. Only it's the white man getting pushed out of this country.
I mean, 82% of people in England and Wales are white at the moment, so I think she's all right for a while, don't you? But of course that's racism, because the 18% of the population that are black, Asian, mixed or another ethnic group, massive majority of them won't be immigrants. They will be children of people that came here from elsewhere, just like Nigel Farage's children are the children of people that came here from elsewhere, just like Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson's children are the children of someone that were not born here. So it's bizarre, isn't it, that they can even think this way. But I think my current favourite, and feel free to contribute more of these examples to the programme. I want to stress, I categorically stress, that although these people run the risk of sounding very stupid, their opinions come from exactly the same place as Nigel Farage's or Daily Mail columnists or Spectator writers or Daily Telegraph commentators. The latter category just know some longer words, but they're just as ignorant, they're just as bigoted, they're just as fact-free. When you have Nick Timothy, Theresa May's former right-hand man, writing literally that multiculturalism, or writing under the headline that multiculturalism is becoming a Trojan horse for Islamist domination, he might as well be talking about the Titanic or Native Americans or indeed pubs and betting shops.
We're losing total control of our country. It ain't the England we know or London we know anymore. And we're been totally beaten into the ground by the politicians. It's a total disgrace.
What is the old England that you knew about back in the day?
Well, it wasn't like it is now. Totally different. Pubs everywhere, betting shops everywhere, loads of places to go. Now there's none.
That interview was conducted outside a pub. Do you know where betting shops became legal in this country? But not a historian of gambling, but I do find it intriguing. I think it was as late as 1961. Before that, the only betting you could do was on course betting. But there you go. That's proof of how awful immigration is. There's no pubs and betting shops anymore. I can tell you what, he's going to be in clover when someone tells him about the internet. 10:51 is the time. Sam's in Bristol. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How you doing?
I'm all right. What's on your mind?
Well, I work for a mental health charity in Bristol, and we work closely with one of the hotels that was targeted. So you can imagine it's a bit of a grim situation that we've come into this week.
Yes.
We recently conducted a survey of the asylum seekers and their mood within that particular hotel. And this was before anything sort of kicked off on the weekend. And
this was the Mercure Hotel, was it, in Bristol?
Yes, Holland House.
Don't give too many details. I don't want any other racist attempted murderers to turn up. But the experience of being in there is one that you can barely contemplate.
Yeah, and I think there is a profound misunderstanding. Like I think with your last caller, it is very easy to sort of dilate everything into slogans like "enough is enough, stop the boats."
Yeah.
Because that is an easy way out. It's almost a conspiratorial sort of mindset. It's a lot easier to say things like jet fuel can't melt steel beams than to have the complete scientific data around it.
Or vaccines are a form of population control.
Yes, it's a bit more seductive than the actual hard facts, and that is the fact that it's easier to say they're just coming over on the boat, stealing our jobs, rather than talking about the very complex asylum system and how these people have had to come to this country and why, and then the historical sort of background to it.
And does it matter, though? I don't want to spend the whole show retrospectively rinsing air in Medway, our first caller, but when you explain to people that the massive majority of asylum applications will be passed because these are bona fide refugees fleeing bona fide persecution, and one of the main reasons why there's a disproportionate number of working age men is simply because they're the ones best equipped to make the journey from the war zones and the various apocalypses. It's not a journey that you'd send an 8-year-old girl on because she simply wouldn't make it. So you can point out all of the flaws in these arguments, and they're beyond flaws. They're completely bogus ideas. But it doesn't matter, because if the dehumanization has taken place, then the facts are worthless, aren't they? You say, here are all the facts, and you say, I don't care. They're illegals. They're subhuman. They're inferior. They shouldn't be here. I'm going to set fire to their hotel.
Yeah, that's the scary part of it, James. I mean, I just keep on thinking what would have happened if they got in there. They had violent intentions on their mind quite clearly. Why else would they go there? Mm. And people like Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage, they have this sort of distance.
Just to be clear, they're both completely appalled by the violence that we have seen. Absolutely appalled by it. Yeah, particularly, I imagine in Robinson's case, by the rioters chanting his name. I'm sure that absolutely he must be just disgusted.
Yes, he must absolutely be hating it. And yeah, they have this plausible deniability that I think we shouldn't be, especially with Farage, who is now in government.
Well, he's not in government, he's in Parliament. It's not as if he ever visited any of these hotels and filmed himself claiming that they could be full of ISIS terrorists. That would really put him in a different... What? Oh. No, he did do that. My apologies.
Yes, and I mean, don't ask him about the songs he sang at school. And this deniability of just being like, oh, well, they've got legitimate concerns. What legitimate concern could you possibly have to set fire to something? What does that grant you? And why go to the hotels if not to do some form of action, which is to intimidate or to act violently?
Well, and yeah, I mean, to terrorise. I mean, the dictionary definition of a pogrom we've seen in Bristol, we've seen in Tamworth, we've seen in Rotherham, and of course the people responsible for firing up these rioters are, their names are very well known. They've popped up a few times on this programme, but they absolutely condemn the violence. I mean, it must be absolutely clear about that. But just an unfortunate mistake that they spread conspiracy theories about the crimes in Southport being committed by a Muslim asylum seeker. The point is, of course, that even if the crimes in Southport had been committed by a Muslim asylum seeker, the idea that you articulate your outrage and disgust at that by looting a Greggs the baker is what happens when people have spent nearly 20 years bending over backwards to excuse, and not even excuse, but to literally join in with the pathetic attempts to claim that there's some sort of victimisation going on. And that's where the two-tier policing line comes in. How on earth do you sustain the idea that what's happening is not absolutely disgusting and your fault, while you claim that somehow the police are to blame? I don't know what the deal is with speaking to family members about what it's like to be policing, but this idea, that's why Mark Rowley yesterday took the microphone of a Sky News journalist and dropped it, which he shouldn't do. I mean, the head of the Met, if he can't keep his temper under control in public, that's not great. But what the Sky News journalist had said to him was a variation on the theme of when did you stop beating your wife? So I ask you that question, when did you stop beating your wife? And you don't beat your wife. What do you do? So you say, are you going to stop two-tier policing? And there is no two-tier policing. What do you do? Incredibly irresponsible journalism, that, but also an incredibly irresponsible response from Mark Rowley. 10:58 is the time. Jasmine's in Barnet. Jasmine, what would you like to say?
Hi. I was just going to not defend the rioters, but perhaps offer a different perspective, of which that they lack, as a group, it seems that they lack a lot of critical thinking, and they are prioritizing to buy whatever the media is selling them. So I think that these people that are out there causing terror and being violent, they truly, truly believe that they are, or their country is in threat. I
think you're right. That's why you play the clips. That's why I play the clips of the people trying to expand upon that genuine belief, and they end up talking about betting shops, the Titanic and Native Americans, because very rarely are they actually asked to expand upon it. But it doesn't take away from the sincerity of the belief that something has been taken away, that something, it doesn't have to be true. You can believe, we all believe things that aren't true at various stages in our life. So what you're doing is doing a little bit of the contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned rhetoric, aren't you?
I am. I'm just trying to offer some sort of perspective that kind of explains, or attempts to explain at least, how they arrived in this position. See, I'm not British, and I am an immigrant. And when I came to this country, there were a lot of things that shocked me, in the sense that people actually truly believed was true to be the Islamic religion. They actually believed that when terrorists die, they get these 72 virgins. They actually believed that this was true, yes, and that was in the Quran, And I was absolutely shocked to see how the media played such a huge part. So not particularly like one story, but consistently through over a long period of time, bit by bit, they are able to make form a narrative and construct a stereotype against the Muslim people, or against various immigrants or colored people or vulnerable groups, and they were able to sell this story to the British people as gospel, and the British people believed it, and there's a certain sect of the British community that perhaps lacks this critical thinking, and it's a skill.
I worry about snobbery here, because Nick Timothy is a Conservative MP trying to give lectures now to Keir Starmer, a man who, whatever the opposite of the Midas touch is, Nick Timothy's got it in spades. He's writing in January of this year, multiculturalism is becoming a Trojan horse for Islamist domination. Absolutely insightful. With a C, not an S. Complete nonsense. Borderline racist, clearly Islamophobic. And he's just been put in Parliament as a Conservative. So does he lack critical thinking, or does he deserve more condemnation than the people throwing bricks at the police because he knows that he's a bigoted fool, whereas they actually believe the kind of lies that people like him spew?
Oh, he definitely doesn't lack critical thinking. I think he's using the fact that people lack critical thinking to his advantage to then push a greater narrative. See, there's different avenues that you can approach the situation, and he is using the fact that certain people lack this critical thinking, the ability to go away and do their own research or form their own opinion, rather than just... So
so we are back to the contempt for the con and compassion for the conned, although it feels a little flimsy in these kind of situations, because if I do something because I believe something that's not true, without veering into the realms of mental health and hearing voices and genuine delusion, but you simply believe something you've been told that's not true. For example, you believe when Tommy Ten Names tells you that that the 3 little girls in Southport have been killed by a Muslim asylum seeker, therefore you go out furious and attack things. You genuinely believe that it's true. You still bear full responsibility for what you've done, whether it was true or not. If it hadn't been, if it had been a Muslim asylum seeker that had done it, the crimes wouldn't change at all, and you'd still bear full responsibility for them. So it's a tricky one. It really is. 2 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 6 minutes after 11. Some of the things that are out there that you can't quite believe include claims yesterday, particularly on one television programme, that these scenes that we're seeing are somehow not Islamophobic. I mean, if by that you mean everybody with brown or black skin is fair game for these thugs and terrorists, then you sort of have a point. But to deny the Islamophobia would be like claiming that an attack upon a synagogue was not anti-Semitic. And speaking of attacks upon religious territory, it was in Burnley, I think, that Muslim gravestones have been vandalised and desecrated, including being splashed with white paint. So, you know, the question of why people lie about Muslims. If the concerns were legitimate, if they were valid, you wouldn't have to lie, you know? I wonder how far you could get if I asked you to list really depraved criminals that we have witnessed in our lives. Sort of, I mean, Ian Huntley, Peter Sutcliffe, Harold Shipman. The list would go on, wouldn't it? Lucy Letby, Fred West, of course. What was the name of the fella who put people in the drain? Nielsen, was it? Dennis Nielsen. And the idea that you'd extrapolate from that, and then how about the sex criminals? You'd extrapolate from that everybody of the same ethnicity or the same professed religion is somehow part of the same problem. This is the nature of majoritarian politics. So I show you a bunch of criminals from my demographic, and because my demographic makes up about 80% of the country, you can't claim really that they represent anything other than themselves. But I show you a disgusting criminal from a minority demographic, and somehow the numbers allow you to pretend that that's representative of a broader truth. That's how you end up with people like Donald Trump calling for Muslim bans, and plenty of people in the British media cheering him on, and plenty of people in British politics still saying that they'd vote for Donald Trump if the opportunity arose. I think Suella Braverman might have said it in this studio a couple of weeks ago. Robert Jenrick, I think, Honest Bob Jenrick, a politician best known for ordering the defacement of murals designed to allow unaccompanied child asylum seekers to feel a tiny frisson of warmth or happiness when they find themselves in an almost inconceivably terrifying scenario, alone and thousands of miles from their homes and their loved ones. Homes that were so risky and so vulnerable that their family sent them on this journey to the safe haven of the United Kingdom. A haven so safe that even Australia is now warning its citizens to be careful when they come here. Joining Nigeria issuing warnings about the safety of Brexit Britain. The United Arab Emirates issuing warnings about the safety of this country. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? 10 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And on we go. I am going to be... two things. The problem is that I only have 3 hours a day. So we will talk about how much responsibility Nigel Farage specifically bears for what is going on this week. Whether it's today or tomorrow, I'm not sure yet. We may wait to see what vile rhetoric he comes out with next. Remember, he did visit hotels, I think in 2020, posted videos. Before he started heading to Dover with his Fisher-Price binoculars, he was taking his camcorder to hotels where asylum seekers were being processed and harassing the staff there and recording himself saying some of the people here might be ISIS. Well, some of the people in this building might be members of the IRA. Some of the people in McDonald's over the road might have been complicit in the Rwandan genocide. So some of the people in the cinema that you visit tonight, they might be, I don't know, they might be Nazi war criminals. Admittedly, they'd be quite old, but it's such a stupid thing to say. But it's designed to incite the kind of fury that has boiled over on the streets of Britain this week, but absolutely nothing to do with Nigel. Extraordinary. And 70 to 80% of the people in those facilities would, of course, have those applications processed, have them accepted, which is a large part of the reason why the Tories wanted to deport successful applicants to Rwanda. And people like Ian Duncan Smith were touring studios under the illusion that the policy was designed only to put unsuccessful applicants in that country. So they don't even the senior politicians. This is why I don't like the snobbery. Because even the senior politicians, whether it's Ian Duncan Smith or Nick Timothy or Suella Braverman, I suppose Nigel Farage, although he's not senior in any meaningful sense, they are just as awful as the people nicking Crocs from a shoe shop in Rotherham. Just as awful. They're just better off. They just lead better insulated lives. They're better educated. They're just as bigoted, just as ignorant, just as wrong. But they're just better off. They get paid by the Telegraph to share their views, so they don't need to take up graffiti. Phil's in Northampton. Phil, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James. How are you?
I'm all right.
Yeah, me too. I've been listening to your programme this morning, and I just sort of listening to what's been going on and watching the news and watching everything that's been happening. I feel like it's almost become the Southport incident, which was horrendous, has become a catalyst to allow and given people who are genuinely perhaps struggling, genuinely perhaps feeling the pinch, genuinely suffering from the last 14 years of Tory government, a target, if you like. It's given them something to see and to sort of give them something to see as an enemy for their frustrations. There are frustrations in this country around the NHS, around education, around everything that has been underfunded for so long and has not had a chance to flourish and show what I think these people would perceive as Great Britain, and they need something to take those frustrations out. And it's very difficult to sort of look, as I said to your producer when I was talking to them, to look inwardly and look reflectively and be sort of a bit more nuanced about the reasons behind all of your frustrations and all of your issues that you have. It's much easier to give it a clear label, which you can clearly identify, in this case, by someone's race or the colour of someone's skin, and vent your frustrations in that way, rather than actually thinking about who your frustration should be aimed at. Now, I realise there's no infinite money tree. There's no magic fix to our public services. There's no magic fix.
I'll tell you what would help.
That.
I'll tell you what would help is processing applications very quickly and letting people get to work.
Absolutely, and I work in education myself, and we have a huge shortage of kind of learning support assistants and people like that, because they're not able to come over here and work these jobs. I was bitten. Well, I went away camping last week. I was bitten. I went to my pharmacy. I went to my GP. I eventually got some antibiotics, but it's just such a time-consuming process, and these people can bring valuable skills, but we're tarring them all with this same brush.
And also, we're blaming them for everything. So I think that David Cameron and George Osborne's austerity gets an incredibly easy ride still, even 14 years since it started. But you look at the diminishment of public services. You struggle to get a GP appointment, and someone says, "Oh, that's because of all the foreigners." It's very easy to believe them, and that's got nothing to do with asylum seekers or quotes illegal end quotes migration. That's the people who just look different from you, which is why that Leave.eu video, which essentially said vote to leave the European Union and we'll get rid of all the dark-skinned people, was so vicious, and that's why, as you are reminding us, what we've seen in the last week has been years in the making. It's not a consequence of the murder of those 3 little girls in Southport. I mean, in many ways, it's got nothing to do with that because, of course, they were killed by a British person, a British-born person. But he will never be proper British in the eyes of the kind of people that are rioting at the moment, or indeed in the eyes of the kind of politicians and public figures that have incited them. I don't know how you do that, because a politician then has to stand up. I mean, you aren't going to get it for the last 14 years and say the reason why your life has been diminished is because we've been too busy lining the pockets of our donors, looking after ourselves and promoting ludicrous crony capitalism. And a Labour Party come out and say the reason why your life is so rubbish is because of 14 years of Tory rule. It sounds like normal footballification of politics. I don't know who's got the job to... I don't know who's qualified to wade into the middle of these unhappinesses and tell the truth about where they come from, because it ain't coming from a Holiday Inn Express in Tamworth, is it?
No, I think there's a certain amount of... I mean, I certainly believe in a government that should be responsible for its actions, and I believe that you should be responsible for your actions. And I feel like playing this blame game is not helping anybody. It's not helping anyone. And you can point your finger all you like. And just to pick up on a phrase that you used, you said proper British, and that's an interesting phrase, I think, because that phrase means so many different things to so many different people.
Does it though? Because I'm proper British, you're proper British. My brown mates, my black mates, my Muslim mates, my Jewish mates, they're all proper British. People that were born...
Well, we're both speaking from a position of common sensibility, potentially.
Yeah, but it's why they use the word indigenous.
The multicultural relationships that we perhaps do.
You know the racism is real when the word indigenous enters the conversation, don't you? Because that's got nothing to do with whether you're integrated or not. It's got nothing to do with whether it was your parents or your grandparents or you that came here from somewhere else. It's got nothing to do with citizenship. It's got nothing to do with public service or paying taxes or being law-abiding. You hear the word indigenous and you've got someone who thinks somewhere inside their soul that a thug throwing bricks at the police has more right to Britishness than a Sri Lankan nurse, a Sri Lankan-born nurse, or the daughter of Sri Lankans. And you know, I understand why people don't like to be quite as outspoken about that as I am, because it does depict people who don't think they're racist as racist. But unfortunately, it is just racism. You know, that fella over there attacking the police, he's British. He's a British patriot. That daughter of Nigerian parents working as a surgeon, she's not indigenous. That's what proper British means to me in the context of these sort of conversations. And it's horrible. 21 minutes after 11 is the time. I mentioned my friends of different backgrounds a moment ago. I get messages from them, particularly on days like today. This is from a Muslim friend from Birmingham, just so depressing, and my family are so scared. They are all texting me. Not necessarily a completely devout Muslim, because he adds, let's have a pint together soon. And another British friend of mine who's black, talking about being on holiday in France, which, as we know, has got huge problems with the far right. But he says, I don't encounter any racism here. I don't fear for my family when I'm here. I don't fear for my safety when I'm here, but I do back quotes home, end quotes. And it breaks my heart to see him put the word home in quotes, after seeing so many white men emboldened to be openly racist and overhearing my own neighbours' conversations about race in recent years. I think my fears are well founded. My friends here in France tell me to stop listening to LBC, as they feel many of your colleagues feign ignorance to elicit the reaction they need for bums on seats, the radio form of clickbait. I'm afraid I agree in part with this, James, and I'm exasperated that when I come home I'll be walking about with suspicion of those around me, a feeling I've not held since the 80s. So what this does to community cohesion is a question best answered by asking what it does to you. I can't ask you yet because the phone lines are a little bit bonkers. But I will later, again, probably every day this week, just what it does to you, how it changes you, That's white privilege, something that the kind of people who've incited the riots or claim that the people rioting have legitimate concerns. That's another thing they hate, the concept of white privilege, which is, I actually understand that. It's an unhelpful phrase. You tell someone who's got no teeth that they're privileged. You tell someone, and I mentioned people who've got no teeth because they pop up surprisingly regularly on the vox pops of protesters and rioters. But you've got no teeth and no job, and someone tells you that you're privileged, you are obviously going to be a little bit aggrieved. And when you open your newspaper or turn on your radio and there's a very, very, very wealthy white person telling you that it's ridiculous to suggest that you've got any privilege, all it means is that you're never going to be discriminated against for being white. Or at least you're never going to live in a society that is statistically and demographically so majoritarian that you're never going to be rendered a second-class citizen, despite, unless we bring apartheid in, I suppose, when you're a member of the 82% part of the population. It doesn't mean you can't be attacked for being white. There's some footage from Birmingham last night outside one pub where it looked as if one white man, although it's impossible to make out what happened prior to the moment, was targeted by Asian men. And no doubt there'll be people using that to claim that this is just, there's good people on both sides or there's bad people on both sides. So we've got one example from Birmingham of an apparent crime being committed by brown people against white people, and therefore all the hotels that are on fire, all the shops that have been looted, all of the graves that have been desecrated, all of the mosques that have been attacked, all the libraries that have been burned, and all of the police who have come under bombardment with everything from broken up gravestones to petrol bombs. That's just the other side of the same coin. It's just the other side of the same coin. It's almost beyond parody, but you have to keep detailing the facts. It's important. So you get to that moment where you sort of think, well, hang on a minute. This scares the life out of me for what it says about our country. How on earth would I feel if I was of an ethnicity that puts me in the sights of these? Well, first of all, of the racist liars on social media and in Parliament and in the British media, but then secondly, of course, puts me in the sights of the terrorists themselves. 25 after 11 is the time. Jazz is in Leicester. Jazz, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Jazz.
I think as a 32-year-old man who has business and a family living in Leicester, I was taken back to the early 2000s of a child of a migrant who moved to the UK in those days where bricks were thrown through our windows in Bradford, and witnessing the Bradford riots take place, and people taking to the streets and burning cars and rolling them down towards the police and into the barricades, and police officers doing nothing but wanting to protect the public and the citizens that they sworn to protect. And then, as a 32-year-old man, I watched the sights again across the country, and it sparks this hurt, It's making me well up just even thinking about the fact that I had to tell my wife and kids and my customers to not go into their local town centre over the weekend because the protests were going to be taking place. And I believe I'm British. I believe that even though I've lived my life here, and my wife is a British Indian woman, and my kids have colour in their skin, and it's terrifying to think that we still live in times where this is okay, for people to think that whatever they're doing and whatever brainwashing is going on in their lives, that to go out to set fire to buildings where people are inside, and that's outright terrorism on our streets. And it's not by people of colour. And, I don't condone anything that's going on anywhere that is causing violence, but this is just terrifying to think that if you walk into your own town centres that are already depleting, and we don't have much going on in our town centres, and then you can't go anymore because you think that someone might turn around and hit you, or someone might just. And
this is what they're desperately hoping for. This is why some of the scenes from Birmingham have been seized upon by precisely predictable people, is that, and I think they probably want the army to be sent in as well, because the whole far right playbook, and I mean proper old school far right fascist playbook, it hinges upon disruption. The more violence it is, the better it is for their cause. I saw a lovely clip, I don't know if you saw it, of a lad in a balaclava saying that he'd had enough as a young Muslim, and he was going to throw a brick at a church, and he turns around and tears off his balaclava and says to the camera, "No, of course I'm not, because that's what they want us to do. That's what they want to happen. They want it to be turned into some sort of two sides nonsense." And that is what I think you're alluding to. If you thought they were coming for your street tonight, what are your options? As a brown-skinned man, what are your options?
What can you do? You just hide. You call the services. What can we do? If they're coming in the masses, and we're a family of four, what can we do? I mean, we're fortunate enough to be surrounded by amazing, accepting neighbours and amazing people around us. But no one walks around with "I'm a racist" tag, or you never know what they're feeling towards you in true honesty. And I've walked down my own street where my business is, and I've had someone cross the road because it was late at night and they thought I might mug them.
That could be a male thing as well. That happens.
But I get it. But this is things you don't know.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I'm trying to talk you out of your own experiences.
But it's the mindset, isn't it? We truly don't know what people are feeling, and the ones that are on the streets, we know what they look like now. We know those faces. They're not wearing balaclavas. They're not covering their faces.
Some of them are wearing balaclavas, including one who just got jailed yesterday because he was wearing a balaclava while displaying arms that had an incredible number of very detailed and easily recognisable tattoos. So once again, the kind of progenitors of the master race often seem to need a little bit of work on proving their own intellectual superiority, don't they?
I completely agree, and I think we just need to, as a nation, just unite and understand that this is just so far wrong. And again, to my point, that in a modern society, what are we reducing ourselves to? Like, what are we being reduced to at the same time? Fear on our own streets, on our own doorsteps.
Has it? I mean, how? I know you can't answer this, but I think you'll try. How long does it take to go back to where you were a month ago? So you're aware that some people will judge you by the colour of your skin. You're aware that some people in Parliament now, sadly, in my profession, tragically, in your community, don't think you're British. I don't think you can ever be British because you have Indian heritage. So that was the situation a month ago, but we're in a very different situation today. How long do you think it will take you, if at all, to get back to how you felt a month ago?
I think it's a matter of safety, in my opinion. Is when you feel safe to be able to walk down your high street without feeling on edge and your head not on a swivel, where someone might say something or do something. I think it's a matter of when you feel safe. It's almost the same as if someone breaks into your house or your car. That's a sacred space. That is your safe haven. And once that safe haven's taken and you feel like that's been violated and that safety's been taken away from you, it's a matter of, it's different for everyone. It might be different for myself and different for anyone else that's out there today who has been attacked. I've got friends who work in nightclubs who are people of colour who have got attacked this weekend. Who have got a hit because they are someone of colour. Not because they've gone out and provoked someone, but they've just got caught in the midst of it. So it's a matter of when you feel safe again to carry on with your everyday life.
That's the question, isn't it? And that is one to which we'll turn our attention a little later in the programme. Take care, mate, yeah?
Thank you.
Cheers, Jazz. 11:32. People talking about their homes, their families, their businesses, and people setting fire to all of the above, claiming that they're upholding British values or they're somehow worried about the erosion of their identity. And that's the crime, the intellectual crime, the moral crime of the last few years, is letting that go unchallenged. Today, it's two-tier policing, letting it go unchallenged, or at best, pretending there's a debate to be had, and not actually demanding evidence. demanding evidence of two-tier policing. Since 2011, since the riots in 2011, the police decide where to deploy. They deploy in trouble spots. So if two groups are likely to convene upon each other, or if buildings are being attacked, or if there are public order offences, then the finite police forces, because they got it a bit wrong in 2011, will be directed towards those areas. So if the far right had turned up in Birmingham last night and clashed with groups of Muslim youths, the police would have been there immediately, or as quickly as they possibly could have done. But their intelligence told them that there was unlikely to be any clashes. So the police are redirected to places where hotels are being set on fire and shops are being looted and front doors are being kicked in. It's not complicated, but it does need explaining, because some of the people falling for Farage's lies, as I think callers to this programme have demonstrated over the years, some of them, as that caller just before the 11 o'clock news reminded us, some of them believe this stuff from a place that's not evil. Why wouldn't you believe it? It's been on the front page of the Daily Mail for the last 20 years. Your mum might believe some of this stuff. So you just need to explain it sometimes. Right? The police will get deployed to the areas where the risk is highest. And a group of people who are preparing for an attack are not going to be the people to whom the police are going to dedicate all their resources. If the attack happens, then the police are there. And at that point, it is two sides. You could possibly say one side is a defender and the other is an attacker, but you know, if they're throwing punches and bricks at each other, the crimes are identical. But if there is no clash, there is no public order emergency for the police to arrive at. And if the people who are preparing to defend their streets from a predicted riot end up committing crimes themselves, then we use the same technology to get their faces into the hands of the authorities, whether those faces are brown or white or something else. It's not difficult unless you come at it from the point that we are fundamentally different, better, worse, inferior, superior. Unless you come at it from that point, the no Irish, no blacks, no dogs legacy, in which case you're intoxicated by it all. Intoxicated. 25 to 12. Amelia Cox has your headlines. 11:38 is the time you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation continues, and sadly so do the riots. More predicted for tomorrow night. Again, we're in relatively uncharted territory. So you've got fascist social media accounts disseminating long lists of places that they want terrorists to attack and congregate at, and expressing that ambition in no uncertain terms. Because they can. They're anonymous. The non-anonymous fascists or stochastic terrorists simply list places where protests are taking place, encourage people to go, and then claim that they're very, very dismayed when the people they've sent to those spots kicks off. And we find ourselves now at 11:39 sort of looking at a couple of other questions, including one that I popped into my head this morning, and at first I thought was quite silly, but the more I think about it, the less silly it becomes. Why aren't there any riots in Scotland? 0345 60973. Why aren't there any riots in Scotland? Maybe there's a really simple answer. Maybe there have been, and I've missed them. Wouldn't be the first time, but I think we might add that to the mix. 20 to 12 is the time. Andrew's in Crawley. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hello there, James.
Hello.
First time I spoke to you. I'm a bit nervous about it.
It's only me. It's only me.
It's only you. I was born and raised in Crawley. We've had a lot of, sort of harmonious race relations for years, and it was absolutely fine with, with the friends who were all Hindus and Sikhs and everything like that. We've had a more influx of they had a lot of Gambians. I've been to Gambia myself. There's a lot of hand-to-mouth charity, taking cases over there with football boots and shirts when we were holidaying and over there in the early 90s. It was great. So my parents, my mum flew for BCAL and BA, and my dad was a customs officer. So we've been all over the world, and I've had a sort of like a view of the world as it seems. I don't like any of this mindless Little Britain and things. And there's something planned apparently for Crawley this weekend at a hotel. There's quite a few hotels housing migrants. I just think that could put the town back years with the relations that have been built with people like that. That could knock it back years.
What do we think, from the point of view of the people who maybe thinking of turning up there. And,
it just doesn't help. Just doesn't help, does it?
No, but what would they consider to be success?
I don't know. You've still got to all live together by then.
Well, exactly.
Tearing your town to bits is a pointless, futile exercise, isn't it?
Well, I think
You've still got to live. The town's got bigger. There are some pressures. We haven't had an A&E at the hospital for years. You know, there's pressures on schools. There's pressures of everything. You know what I mean? There's anything like that. But I mean, trying to burn people out of hotel rooms doesn't really achieve anything, does it? Really, it doesn't really help.
Well, not unless you want to stay in a newly vacated, burnt-out hotel for the weekend.
Well, exactly.
Andrew,
if you want your washing in the summer to smell like ash and that sort of thing forever, and burnt wood, that's fine. But that's kind of what you're going to get, aren't you?
When did things change? I mean, is it just the last few weeks? This
I don't know. It's not really the last few weeks. There's more sort of things with Brexit, but it's always been quite harmonious. For how many people are in the town now, it's grown, and how many things. It's generally been pretty harmonious. I mean,
yes.
I had a big school with 1,500 pupils, probably 5 or 6, of non-whites in every class, and I went for school. I didn't have a whiff of racism and anything like that. There was none of that. But I mean, it just seems to be the Muslims seem to have got a lot more sort of attention. What with the things with terrorism and things going on like that. Well, there's one thing that's a bit of a strange example. There was a house by a shopping. There's a big shopping sort of out of town shopping thing.
Yeah.
There, kind of thing. There was a house there that was on its own, and I mean, I was running around with a bit of the pack in the 90s. It didn't matter. I went past it 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, but late at night at some very, very weird and unsocial hours, there was always lights on, and that turned out to be a place where there was some very secretive, like clerics and some
right, yes.
Islamic,
proper Islamist extremism,
Islamic teaching, yeah, and unfortunately that plot about the fellas, I think they're due to come out now. It was around 20 years ago.
Yeah,
they got around that sort of time where that plot was plotted, and it was foiled there by the MI6 who bugged it. They found all the guys with the fertiliser that were going to bomb Tiger and Blue Water.
I remember that.
Coordinated.
That makes me feel old. I was on air
I know,
when
that makes me feel old. It's
Lord
ridiculous.
Above, yes.
It's well over 20 years. I know, I'm 45.
It's not. It's about
well
20 years.
Ago.
It's about 20 years.
Around 20 years, yeah. And it's right opposite a large company that's expanding thing that does military things, and it's very protected, and it's quite a national security. But after that symbolism there, they built a big mosque there. Now that's not very. That's a bit of a real sort of sick sort of symbolism, really. That's not a great thing.
I'll tell you what it is. It's a poor planning decision, is what it is.
It is a poor. Definitely. But they opposed it a lot. This company called Talis, which does military things with. So a sign of sort of national defence, and then someone who was prepared to blow up innocent people, and then
but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same people, would it? I mean, I've agreed that it's a poor planning decision, but you can't associate all of the people who worship in that mosque with the scumbags that were planning a terror attack in the same geographical area. But the point you're making is it could probably that some of those conclusions that were jumped to could probably have been avoided.
Yes, but at best it's a bit of a weird symbolism to have that. It's a bit like you mentioned Fred West earlier on. It's a bit like knocking his house and building a nursery there. and it's a little bit, it's a bit.
But it's not. I'm going to push back a bit. I understand entirely the point that you're making. And it would feel inappropriate, but only if you are, with the best will in the world, conflating Islamist terrorism with peaceful Islamic worship, and it's hard not to because of just because of the syntax, just because of the words. But that's why I push back politely against some of the points that you're making, and the up to and including the Fred West analogy. A sparkling debut. Nonetheless, Andrew, I look forward to talking to you again. It's 11:45. It is 11:48, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I can see where my callers are, but I don't know much about what they're going to say. However, my next one's in Edinburgh, and the one after that is in Paisley, so I wonder whether the question of why there haven't been any riots in Scotland is about to get some answers. We'll find out in a moment. But there are a couple of other things that I wanted to draw attention to. Carl is in Peterborough, and he just sent me a little message. So I'm not sure if this is white privilege or not, James, but I think a special shout out to white British working class anti-racism activists would be welcome. I know that in a way we're putting targets on our own backs, but it's still true that the right wing takes aim at us as well. We don't have to be working class to be in that category. You just have to be anti-racist. racist, but I take your point, because what people who went to schools like mine, well, not exactly like mine, actually, happily, I don't know why, but people who were privately educated, people who went to, in Farage's case, Dulwich College, for example, they like to claim that racism is a working class concern. It's only working class people that hate foreigners. It's pretending that things like Cable Street never happened, and that's why I think Carl is perfectly entitled to reference class in this contribution. He goes, there's no movement which can deal with the fundamental issues that have created conditions for the far right to grow yet, but there's a huge number of us willing to fight on the streets or in rebuilding affected communities. No pass around. And that's the problem, isn't it? What do you do if they're on your street? What do you do? Particularly, of course, if the police aren't there. Although, as I say, if two groups look like clashing, if the police intelligence is that the far right are heading into an area where Asian men are preparing to defend themselves, the police will be there. But if the far right aren't expected to turn up, the police won't be there. A point that many people covering the situation in Birmingham last night seem to be missing quite spectacularly. But as I've said a few times, these are uncharted waters. But what happens if a group of anti-racist activists, and I think the fact that they're white is pertinent as well, because it stops racists from claiming that this is two sides of the same coin. I am white, I am anti-racist. So if I stand against a racist riot, you can't claim it's because I'm brown, can you? So what then? That's why, again, you have to hope that the government response, I don't want to say improves, because there aren't, there's no evidence that they've got anything wrong yet, particularly. I certainly am not going to join in the criticism of the police, which seems to me to be about as close to unpatriotic as you can get in these sort of circumstances. But they need something else. Otherwise, it's going to have a very long tail, this disaster. You usually wait for the weather to change or something like that. That's the question Nick asks, in fact, in this text. Do you think it's time for a new Cable Street? I think that's what Carl is alluding to. I hope not. I really do hope not. 11:51 is the time. Jennifer is in Edinburgh. Jennifer, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I actually picked up the phone to talk about what you were saying about Nigel Farage and the misinformation that he spread and how responsible he should be. But also I'll touch on why we're not having riots up in Scotland. But the first thing that I wanted to say is that there's a huge deficit of information out there about people who have visas and people who are given visas. And once these people go through the system and they get processed and they get given these visas and they become taxpayers, hopefully, which should be the ultimate system, the first thing that they see when they open up their visa is no recourse to public funds. And I think that's something that really there should be more, we should be more aware of. I'm aware of it because my husband's one of those people. He is he's an immigrant, he is a Muslim. I'm neither of those things, but that is what we're told, no recourse to public funds. So despite having to pay thousands, now double that, to even just get his visa accepted, he has to pay thousands to the NHS before he'll even get his visa approved. So he'll already have paid into the system. On top of that, he works and he's a top-rate taxpayer. But should we ever fall on hard times, should my husband ever get into the situation where we would need to go back to the state into which we both pay substantial amount of monies every month, we get no help because he's an immigrant.
I don't like that rule. I think it was designed to appease the sort of rhetoric that has incited these riots. But it never would it? Because it's a logical attempt to appease something illogical. So telling your top-rate tax-paying husband that he's not entitled to take out of the pot, should he ever need to, into which he has paid in, was supposed to diffuse the rancid rhetoric of people like Farage. But it can't, because it's making a presumption that rancid rhetoric is somehow diffusable, that these people want rational responses to irrational problems. I don't think that should be the law. It may be that you only found out about it when he got his visa.
I'm not sure. We've only been married since 2021.
I wouldn't be surprised if it came in under the... I'd be very surprised if it was pre-2010.
I mean, it's definitely, it's a Tory policy, and I mean, it's just for anybody who thinks that anything to do with the Home Office is either easy or pleasant is absolutely misguided, because I was just thoroughly disgusted when we had to go through the process. It is an absolutely
so then you have to look for the people who are getting stuff, the people from overseas who are getting stuff. And in the case of asylum seekers, of course, they're not allowed to work, and they are put up in fairly unpleasant conditions, occasionally in buildings that used to be pleasant. But, the idea of having to reheat, well, I've seen the reports that the Home Office has undertaken and that individual councils have undertaken. But what you've got is that scenario where the kind of people who are ideologically motivated to go on these riots, they don't think that asylum seekers should get anything at all. Because if you give them one pence, that's 1 pence they can pretend would otherwise have gone to pensioners or military veterans or children or whatever.
And this whole thing about military veterans being on the streets, there's lots of complex needs behind that argument. So it's not a direct comparison.
Well, you know that, and I know that. And also, if you were to meet them with their own logic, you'd say, well, why don't you put them up in your own home then, if you care about them so much?
Yes. But when we talk about asylum seekers coming across here, they come across here and they are people who come from their own homes and where they'll have their own businesses and they will have careers. And then they come across here seeking our help, and we put them into places that you wouldn't even allow a cockroach to live. They have absolutely no money. You strip these men who come across with their families of all dignity and all ability to provide for their families. You turn them into essentially parasites of the state. You put them up against the absolute abhorrent asylum system that the last Home Office was running. And these are people who English isn't their first language. English is my first language, and I could not understand how to get through the asylum system. Not the asylum system, sorry, the visa system with my husband. And these people are just completely, the feet must be taken away from them. We turn them into absolute dependence of the state, and then we have people like Nigel Farage who talk about them like they're parasites. And then we wonder
why people who are a little bit harder of thinking perhaps end up throwing petrol bombs at the police.
Yeah, so moving on to the thing you were asking about, why we don't have riots up here in Scotland. The people that are head of government talk about immigration in a completely different way. Now, I am no SNP supporter. I have zero time for them, and I'm so glad about the last election results that they've been wiped out in Westminster. But you look at the difference between when the Gaza protest started. You look at the difference in how they were talked about. We had Hamza Yusuf up here who went out to mosques, he went out to synagogues. He talked the language of unity. And he talked about it in a completely different term. The protests that I attended in Edinburgh and Glasgow, they were welcome protests. They were peaceful, they were well policed, and they were well regarded within the community. Whereas you look at the same down in England, and you look at the language that came out, and that is from, and they were talked about as hate marches and rioters, and the rhetoric that came out about that was just so divisive.
Yeah.
And when
it felt disgusting at the time, but I don't think I clocked that it was sowing seeds for what's happening now.
It absolutely was, and it absolutely has been for a very long time. And it comes down to this, and there's no real way to pussyfoot about this, but I've got a black husband. And if I was to, and it essentially comes down to this kind of, I couldn't say anything racist because I've got a black husband.
Yeah.
And that is what you've got at the very, very top of the Westminster government when it was the Tories. You had a very diverse front bench, but what they were all united against was migrants. But they were all united against people of their own communities. So if you have somebody who's saying, well, I can't be racist because I'm the same colour as you.
I'm from Nigeria. So, my parents are from Nigeria or Sri Lanka or Jamaica or whatever it may be. But here I am fully endorsing the worst excesses of anti-migrant rhetoric. It's not quite the camouflage that perhaps people thought it was. I think about this a lot. And one of the reasons I think about it is because, and we're not mentioning any names, you've alluded to the front bench, which I think is fine. But do they honestly not realise that if they were living in the areas where these rioters have been kicking in doors, it's their doors that would be kicked in first?
They absolutely realise it, but they're above that.
They just know it'll never come. Well, they presume it will never come to that.
They know it'll never come to them because they can afford not to live in the kind of communities that they're inciting.
Although in the case of the attacks on hotels, they are not necessarily in some of the more troubled and I don't want to say deprived, but some of the poorer parts of town. The hotels can, of course, as our first caller yesterday reminded us, can be in the middle of quite middle class enclave. So I guess maybe not quite middle class enough to be home to a Conservative MP from an ethnic minority who has been very much complicit in the ramping up of the kind of rhetoric that has prompted some of the scenes that we've seen in recent weeks. Do you know, quite a few of you are sending me reminders of crimes committed by white people that were beyond belief. Some of them I'd completely forgotten, but the point stands, doesn't it, about proportionality. It is 3 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's do a side order of why haven't there been any riots in Scotland, but I don't want to jinx anything. I'll do a phone in at 3 minutes past 12 on a Tuesday about why there haven't been any riots in Scotland. It kicks off in Cowdenbeath at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But I just wonder whether there is from your point of view as someone who lives in Scotland, I do want to know whether or not there is, in your view, a reason for it. Is it beyond coincidence? Could the rest of us learn, working on the presumption that we don't like riots, which I appreciate alienates some members of the society that we all share, but is there something that English politicians could learn from Scottish politicians, or English media could learn from Scottish media, or am I, presumably not for the first time, am I talking utter twaddle? 0345 6060973. 4 minutes after 12 is the time, and I'd also like to talk about Elon Musk, but I'm not quite sure how to. The idea, if you look into it, he's been tweeting for years that various corners of Europe are facing inevitable civil war. It's obviously gibberish, but he has the power to do it. There's a very good piece in Tortoise as well, which I should tweet for you, actually, by Xavier Greenwood, which looks at how the decision to put the serial criminal Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who, of course, reasons I've never fully understood, uses a false name, back on Twitter, has caused a huge increase in the kind of rhetoric and comment that leads to these kind of riots. He's falsely claimed that people were stabbed by Muslims in Stoke on Trent and Stirling. He's called for mass deportations, shared demonstration posters, described violent protests in Southport as justified, shared a video that speculated that the suspect in the Southport stabbings was Muslim, a widespread piece of disinformation that helped trigger the riots across the country. But, you know, we took a call at 10 o'clock this morning, or 20 past 10 this morning, from someone who was trying to tell me that he's blameless and absolutely opposed to everything that we've seen in recent weeks. So putting him back on Twitter, and then in the case of Elon Musk, joining in really with this kind of bile, I don't know. How do we measure how significant it is? Mate, is that the question? How significant is social media? Without social media, would this be happening? Because it's tempting to think, no, it wouldn't. The accounts that worry me the most, and they've worried me for ages, the accounts that worry me the most are the ones that are dedicated to detailing crimes committed by people of colour from anywhere in the world. So, you know, you would go to the murder of Lee Rigby. You would reach immediately for some footage of someone attacking a shopkeeper in the south of France who's black, not the shopkeeper, the attack. And it's just clip after clip after clip after clip after clip after clip. And it's intended to create the idea that there is a proclivity to criminality based upon ethnicity, which is, you know, that's how Holocausts happen, never mind pogroms. A proclivity for criminality. What's weird about Yaxley Lennon's role in all of this is that he is well above average when it comes to criminal convictions. Everything from mortgage fraud to immigration offences. His season ticket for prison is almost as powerful as Farage's season ticket for Question Time, despite the fact that they're sort of two buttocks of the same backside in so many ways. And yet without the Twitter, without the social media Twitter, I mean, would all of this have been happening? And then the question becomes, is Elon Musk above retribution? Is he like a Bond villain? I think of Jonathan Pryce. Which one was that? I'm glad to hear from Blair. All is well in Cowdenbeath. I don't know why I settled on that. It's probably something to do with the football. But is he above? Is he now like kind of more powerful than a state? The misinformation that he isn't just responsible for by reinstating various disseminators of misinformation, but also joining in with it and then saying, I don't know what the British government can do. We should probably find an expert to tell us. And if you're wondering whether I exaggerate, you remember when I was telling you about the number of times that Farage had appeared on Alex Jones's show after the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones had widely disseminated the lie that children murdered in the Sandy Hook massacre, that it was all a hoax, that their parents were liars and actors, that the children hadn't actually been murdered. Guess whose show Yaxley Lennon made an appearance on from his luxury holiday this week? I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? What is it that you're so passionate about? Innocent children being killed. Whose show are you going to appear on? That guy from America who claims that the innocent children killed at the Sandy Hook massacre weren't actually killed, and that all of the security services and their parents and the politicians and the mainstream media have conspired in an enormous hoax to pretend that they were actually... Oh, I see. So you're so concerned about the 3 little girls in Southport that you're going to go and malign the memories of the children killed in the Sandy Hook massacre with a man that faces enormous libel bills for spreading those lies. That's the thing that's frustrating. If you have even the vaguest grasp of truth, facts, evidence, you'd find that unbelievably offensive. Whose show are you going to appear on? Alex Jones's. Oh, okay. And what did Yaxley Lennon do on that show? Thanked Elon Musk for giving a voice for the truth. So he's on a show presented by a man who has lied to the point of almost unbelievable obnoxiousness about dead children and their families, to thank Elon Musk, who has endorsed the idea that Britain is heading for a civil war, for giving a voice for the truth, referring to himself, despite the fact that he spreads lies on an almost industrial scale. Hey-ho. It's 10 minutes after 12. Michael's in Staines. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hey, how you doing, guys? So I would like to say something, which is I am brown skin, Muslim, and in a racist white chat group. So I know exactly what's going on to some degree, and I can share some insights in terms of what they're spreading. And I'll tell you, it's a long story how I got into a group, but it was initially for banter. But just to give you an example.
But when you first got into it, was it doing the sort of stuff that it's doing now?
So
but do they know you? Are you mates with these people?
Well, no. So this is it. I know a person who's, like you've got a group admin and all of that stuff, right? So the initial thing. So
most people there don't know that you're Muslim or Asian?
No, I don't think so. Only one or two maybe. But the whole context is all of these guys, they're all blokes mostly, van drivers, they're all mechanics or, doing DIY type of. So the initial group is like, we've got lots of banter, but it was more about, they put things like, oh, I've got a big job on to take this wheel off, or what wrench do I need for this and this.
So you had a shared interest in something mechanical.
Yeah, something like that. And then it was more the banter because he said, you get some really funny content. And then for me, like when you get content, you want to share content because you want to be relevant, right? So that's kind of what it is. And what I found out is most of these, I couldn't tell you how many people in the group, but most of these are racist as anything against blacks, against Muslims, and the sheer amount of content that I get, and people probably thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are you still in the group? Because I look at a group and I laugh at myself, thinking, really, like, is that what your mindset is? Is that how you are? Like, can these guys be changed? And just give you an example, that massacre with the three innocent girls, in Stockport,
Southport.
So
that's all right.
Apology.
That's fine.
So guess what the message was that was sent out? It's not done.
Well, have you run it by the producer?
Oh, it's not. Sorry, it's not. It's not. It's not racist.
I can't risk it though, mate.
I won't say. Okay, I won't tell you what the message is, but
but I want to know. Just have a word with the producer. Let them know, because we got Ofcom. I mean, some organisations respect the rule of Ofcom, if you like. Others less so. But I can't let you read something out that you've already told me as evidence of something pretty unpleasant, unless we've actually heard what it is. 12 minutes after 12 is the time. I won't take another call. I'll wait. I'll wait until Michael comes back on. I mean, the question, are we all right? Are we good to go? Have we made a decision about this? Yeah, okay. Off you go, mate.
The message was, don't be fooled by what you hear. That 17-year-old lad was radicalised 2 weeks ago, and the police are under pressure not to tell you. So they don't want to cause a chaos. So they're already putting in your head that he's been radicalised, but the media are not allowed to tell you because.
And then Farage appears in a filming himself, saying things like, "Oh, there are lots of questions that haven't been answered," and "Oh, the security services haven't told us." So the people like your mates in this group reading that see someone like Farage saying that and think, "Oh, there must be something in it then." So it builds up a momentum, despite being built entirely on nonsense.
Exactly, and then there's things like, being an Englishman, we should be fighting for our rights. How is it that the Muslims have Islamic banking and we don't? And it's just like narrow-minded, because Islamic banking is not about your colour of your skin, and it just says like you can't have, we don't believe in interest. So if you want to, have savings without interest and invest in other areas.
Do you ever take it on?
In what sense?
Do you ever explain this stuff to people?
No, because the tone of these guys, they're very the violent tone on some of the messages. So, like, I keep,
just keep your head down.
There's some real hatred. Don't get me wrong, real hatred. I read it and I'm thinking.
I think that what you're doing, whether you realise it or not, is you're reminding us why some people, kind of people that tend to text me, but don't really ring in anymore. They tell me, you're completely out of touch. You don't know that this is going on. You don't know what ordinary people think. And they're talking about that. And of course, I do know all about it. I mean, I see it, not least when Sadiq Khan is in the studio taking calls from listeners. But the idea, you don't know what people believe and just how ignorant, they wouldn't put it like this, but just how ignorant and yet passionate they are about Islamic issues. And what you're telling us is this is normal. This isn't extraordinary or abnormal. This is completely normal, quotes, banter, end quotes, that is profoundly Islamophobic. And
it's daily.
Yeah.
Daily.
And in the context of what we're seeing this week, it's dangerous.
No, exactly. And the point is, in relation to the riots, they remind you of like upcoming riots, dates, and you should stand for our country, blah, blah.
Why are you still in it?
Okay. Well, I'm in it because I just look at like how it's for me. It's like, can people be so hatred and stupid? It's just like, and the thing is, I don't just jump out because like I'm kind of like I want to jump out, but I want to kind of probably go to the right authorities as well because of
something did cap on you, and then you're there. It's a good point you make. Thank you for that. I'm sorry for being a little bit school teacher-ish in the middle, but these are febrile times, and sometimes people listening don't realise the nature of broadcasting rules and regulations. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what you read out. I don't know why I just got the heebie-jeebies. Touch of the Keiths, as we call it in the studio. It's 12:16. 12:18 is the time. If you begin a message to the studio, you are a hypocrite because you run the risk of me not actually reading it to the end, but this one's quite short. So you are a hypocrite because you're still on Twitter. I don't know, actually. I've thought about it. I tried to come off. I signed up for Threads. I enjoyed Threads. But there's two things. I mean, if you think of some of the characters I've had to share studio space with here over the years, the idea that no, not you, Keith, people who are no longer on the payroll, the idea that I leave in disgust at some of the characters that have been on the payroll, that never quite worked for me. Although you often told me that I should, I never quite understood what that would achieve. In a sense, massively reducing the size of my own platform in order to express disapproval of other people's platforms. didn't make sense. And I kind of thought the same about Twitter. I kind of thought, well, what's the point of pulling out if you then leave the space clear for the, the kind of people telling lies about the murderer or the alleged killer, alleged for strictly legal reasons, obviously, of 3 little girls in Southport. So I don't know. And it always makes me sound a little bit boastful. You know that I'm boastful, right? So if I'm uncomfortable sounding boastful, you know that I'm telling you the truth, because I'm perfectly comfortable being boastful the rest of the time. But there was some really weird research that Reuters did about a month ago. And it claimed, and I don't fully understand the mechanics of how they worked it out, but it's Reuters, who are a very a reputable organisation. It claimed that when it came to presence on social media, I was the most influential public figure in the country. And listen, I don't really know. I don't believe it, actually, but it's Reuters. So then I found myself swimming back in the opposite direction and thinking, well, I can't plumbing pack it on the head, can I? Because if I do, then the kind of lies that are everywhere will have one of their most prominent resistors removed from the debate. But the last week, it's got so awful. It's got so awful that you kind of think, well, maybe we should just leave it to them. And then I just become like a bit of a pathetic person and think, oh, I've got 1.2 million followers. I don't want to give up. I've taken years cultivating that following. I really enjoy being on Twitter a lot of the time. Most of the time. I enjoy all elements of it, almost. The comedy. I enjoy blocking the idiots. I enjoy looking at exchanges. I enjoy the moments of happiness. I enjoy cat videos sometimes and people falling into swimming pools. There's a million things to enjoy about it. So why should I give up on that? But, well, Jamie, thank you. Says, I'm grateful you're still on there. You need sanity and evidence-based information in a sea of whatever the opposite would be. So, I've got 1.2 million followers, which I can use that platform to point out that Yaxley Lennon is lying about people being stabbed by Muslims in Stoke-on-Trent and Stirling, pointing out that he is sharing videos speculating that the Southport stabber was the culprit there, the alleged culprit there was a Muslim. Widespread misinformation. I don't know, though. I don't want to be yin to the yang of these disgusting individuals. And now it sounds I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'm not. I'm just addressing that relatively innocuous accusation of hypocrisy, because maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Let's head up to Scotland and try to work out why there aren't any riots there. Gary's in Paisley. Gary, what can you tell us?
Hello, I think there's a big misconception that maybe we don't have as much racism up here.
I'm not talking about racism. I'm talking specifically about these riots, attacks on the police, burning hotels, all that kind of thing.
Okay, so I live in Paisley. I would say, about 60 seconds walk from a hotel where people seeking asylum are currently being forced to live by the UK Home Office. Yes. They get about £1 a day or so to live on. And that hotel is going to be the subject of a protest this Friday.
Right.
There is some opposition being organised to it. But, I live near it and I've never had any issues with anyone living there. I've never had any issues with anyone really living here at all. Obviously, things happen in a town. I would say the biggest problem that Paisley faces at the moment is deprivation. Yeah. And I would say it's people selling drugs and violence relating to that and gang crime and, children being involved in it. But I wouldn't say that the problem is people from other countries being forced to live here by the Home Office while they wait for their asylum claim to be processed.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the area on Friday, what it's going to be like, how febrile it's going to be, how many people are going to show up. And I think from the past, we've seen that the Scottish far right, they're sort of badly organised, they like to argue with each other, but things like this can sort of galvanise a movement. Recently they were in Erskine, but they've not been afraid to show their faces in Alloa and Wishaw before. I was actually at the protest in George Square that was organised by asylum seekers, complaining about the conditions in Mears Group-owned accommodation, which was then essentially sabotaged by what was known as the statue defenders. Right, and they were the ones who turned violent. That was where the racist violence expressed itself at that time during COVID. So I think there's a reason why it's not happened here yet. It's just because people need a little bit of time to get organised. We aren't.
So you're raining on my parade of optimism, parade of Scottish optimism. You are absolutely. You're bringing the Scottish weather to my parade. Aren't you?
Can go. James, you can go to any number of pubs in Paisley in Glasgow, and if you started giving it the stop the boats patter, people would be more than happy to hear it.
I know that. I'm not pretending it's Oz, the land of Oz, or anything like that. But the invitation to set fire to buildings, loot shops and attack police has been in place now for over a week, and it hasn't been taken up. And it may not be taken up on Friday. The protest may not devolve into the kind of scene. So it's more about the scenes.
That you've been seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say there's always the potential. Of course there is. I think maybe our politicians are treating that a little bit more seriously. I think there was serious police failures over the weekend, and that's not to disparage the hard-working police officers who put themselves in incredible danger. I think it's an organisational and a structural problem where underfunding and years of cuts have left them unable to respond to public order disasters like this.
So you're saying it's just luck? It's just luck that it hasn't happened yet, and I shouldn't read anything into it.
I would say almost yes. These things have a habit of spreading as more people want to get involved, and until serious consequences are evidenced, which they are starting to be, I think people will be willing to try their luck, express their racism and sadism and their pleasure at seeing the joy of terror, in someone's face. That is what they're after, and I don't think we should be any under illusions that this is because of deprivation or economic, disadvantage. I think people enjoy being racist and they enjoy committing racist violence when they get the opportunity to, and it's up to us as a wider society to tell them, no, we're not going to let you do this, and you will suffer consequences if you attempt it.
All of these people sending me messages saying, why do you keep saying Britain? It hasn't happened in Scotland. They need to give their head a wobble. I hope you're wrong. And I don't want to give any more attention to any planned protests. But I hope you're wrong. But you don't think you are, obviously.
Yeah, me too. I'd be great if it was wrong. But I think people are looking for any excuse. And the thing about the far right and people who share their sympathies and who are well on their way to becoming fully paid up members is they do get a joy out of it. They do get pleasure out of it. And it's up to us to stop them. It's essentially what they hope to achieve is mass deportations and a climate of fear for people who aren't white. And we need to stand up to them and say it's not acceptable and you will suffer consequences socially, criminally. The whole spectrum needs to be devoted to excising this poison from our society that's been allowed to grow for so long unabashed. And on the top of it, you have an asylum industry that is happy to profit from the continued immiseration of people coming to this country. So it's almost like everybody wins,
Yes.
Our media gets to enjoy the clicks, the headlines, the sensationalism. Your G4Ss, your Sercos, your Sodexos, your private landlords, the people who own the hotels, they're all enjoying bumper pay packets at the misery imposed on asylum seekers in this country. And I think that's where we need to start. We need to start going, this is wrong, this whole system is wrong. We need people to be integrated into our society. People want to work, but even then, if they can't work, because let's face it, if you're coming from Iraq or you're coming from Rwanda and you've been persecuted for who you are and you've suffered trauma, I used to work and support people who were involved in the asylum system, and some of the stories are just horrific that you hear. And if someone comes over here looking for a better life and they can't get a job, we're not going to send them back. We're going to let them integrate and become a member of society in a way that they can be, just as we would anyone else in this country. That's what I would like to see, James. I don't think it's very likely any point soon, even if that is the right thing to do. But at the moment, I think a lot of people are making a lot of money out of this situation, and they're happy to inflame the tensions for as long as humanly possible, rather than do the right thing, which would provide people with the correct support, opportunities to work, to be educated, to contribute to their communities. And instead, what they're faced with is far-right violence, discrimination in employment and education and healthcare everywhere they go. And when they do finally get here, they have to pay money, as the last caller, Jennifer from Edinburgh, said, they have to pay money every year for their visa, more so than any naturalised.
And that goes back much further than I thought, long before, I think long before 2010. And it's I suppose we're back to the media, and why wouldn't more people be aware of the fact that a massive number of people who were born overseas and now work here and pay taxes here have no recourse to public funds, have to pay an extra premium to use the NHS? Quite discriminatory policies, really. Why wouldn't more people be aware of that? To which the answer is really simple. Is if your business model depends upon demonising these people, the last thing you want to do is point out that they are not responsible for or party to many of the perceived injustices that you think they are. If you're a Daily Mail columnist, you don't want your readers to know that fellow over the road who was born overseas has to pay to use the NHS or has no recourse to public funds if he loses his job 10 years after 10 years of paying top-rate income tax. That was what the situation Jennifer's husband could find himself in. And Gary, mate, I needed a call like yours today. I just calm, measured, decent, compassionate, evidence-based. It'll never catch on. Speaking of matters Scottish, I'm not the only one who wondered why there hadn't been any riots in Scotland, because many of the people that we've been talking about today were claiming last night that 3 women had been stabbed in the town of Stirling by, wait for it, a Muslim, which prompted the police Scotland in the Forth Valley to put out a tweet saying the 29-year-old is currently in police custody. He is described as a white man and local to the Stirling area. I don't want the ethnicity of alleged criminals to be contained within these reports. But when the racist liars tell racist lies about the ethnicity of criminals, alleged criminals, I don't know what else the police are supposed to do. And up to and including people like Farage saying, "Oh, we need to know more." You don't reveal the name, usually, of a 17-year-old, whatever crime it is they're accused of. You certainly can't reveal it until a judge has sat in judgment and decided that we can make an exception in this case. But the facts never, ever, ever matter to these people. And that is where we are, It's 12:31. Tim Humphrey has the headlines. It is 12:34. What about the personal impact as well? As we move towards the end of today's programme, we'll come back to a theme that we'll be exploring for as long as this nightmare continues. How is it changing your behaviour? I spoke yesterday about people keeping their children at home, and that's for fear of the unspecified, as opposed to being caught up in the specified, as opposed to the horror of knowing. I'm haunted more perhaps by the shopkeeper that I heard being interviewed today from Middlesbrough. It was a great piece of radio. They spoke to 3 different people: a 17-year-old girl from a Muslim family, a grandmother from a white family, for want of a better word, or a more helpful word, and then a local shopkeeper from a Muslim shopkeeper. And they were so powerful. It's such a brilliant selection of interviewees. But the one that probably haunted me the most was the idea of watching it on TikTok arrive on your street, watching it arrive on social media, and knowing that recognising the landmarks. So the young woman witnessed her mother's car being totaled, and attempts to smash in her door. The window above the door was smashed to pieces. The older woman from across the park was describing her horror at what had happened and how completely at odds it was with what she knew of that area, and how young the perpetrators were, and how confident she was that so many of them had been brought in had bussed themselves in from overseas. And then the shopkeeper, who said if we hadn't got the shutter down 10 seconds earlier, then they'd have been in the shop. You pull the shutter down. And what are they hoping to prove? There's too many people in asylum processing. The backlog is too long. Why is that the fault of a shopkeeper in Middlesbrough or a 17-year-old Muslim girl? Why is it the fault of anybody who lives in the area of Rotherham that was set on fire by these rioters? And why are we in a country where we can't even agree unanimously on this being absolutely unacceptable behaviour? And that is something we should have zoned in on a bit earlier. You said you know my favourite game when I talk about comas. I talk about, imagine I've been in a coma for 10 years. thinking of previous riots, the 2011 riot, I remember putting out a tweet to people contemplating joining in, saying, please don't, just stay at home, don't do it. There's no point jeopardising your entire future to be caught up in this moment. And I was one of those rare occasions where I took an absolute shoeing on social media that I wasn't expecting. I generally know when to expect one, but it was people who were, you don't know what it's like, the anger is palpable. And I thought, well, I'm sorry. The anger might be palpable and you might be furious, but you just don't riot, ever. It's never, ever, ever legitimate concerns, or I disapprove of what they're doing, but they've got a point. You just don't ever, ever riot. I don't know, maybe it's naive. I kind of thought that was unanimous. You'd say, oh, no, look, I've got profound concerns about immigration as well. But these people are terrorist scum. It's not that hard to do. But if you worry that they're your people, then maybe you worry about alienating them by calling them terrorist scum. Maybe your entire business is built upon the kind of rhetoric and lies that have incited the kind of behaviour that we've seen over the last few days. 12:38 is the time. Sarah's in Exmouth. Sarah, what made you pick up the phone?
I picked up the phone, James, because you were talking about X and people were texting you saying, I think they were saying you're being a hypocrite for staying on there. And I think it is time for everyone who is anti-racist to come off of platforms like X and like WhatsApp. And I've done it myself. I did it during the Black Lives Matter protest because a member of my own family shared something that was racist, and I confronted them on there and I said that I was leaving because of it. And I think, you know, you've talked about the business models of these platforms, and I think they are business models that are based on hatred and outrage. And by being on those platforms, we are basically being their customers. We're feeding it. You know, we're actually allowing them to use our outrage to help them make money.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with much of that, except to say, how then do who points out the racist lies if everybody who points out racist lies has left?
Well, I think
it sounds like surrender.
Isn't it, Donald? Isn't it? No, it's not surrender. It's boycotting, and boycotting does get places. You know.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you do this until Musk takes action to stem the stuff that has.
Well, it's a private company, isn't it? It's his private company. You come off of there. There are other platforms. Maybe there's a bit more work to do in terms of people who are anti-racist actually being quite collaborative and actually thinking in the same way as they do, by moving as a gang or as a mob or whatever, you know, like as a group of people. There's a saying that I said to the person that answered the phone, but it was a saying from the 60s that people used to say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think if we're on those platforms, we are part of the problem. And if we remove ourselves from them, is it Truth Social that is the Donald Trump platform?
We're going to do.
Who listens to that? Who listens to that?
Yeah, but Elon Musk is one of the richest people in the world. He doesn't need to make any money from Twitter. He's not going to be worried by losing the pennies that you and I have control.
Well, maybe it's not just the money that he actually gets.
Oh, he'd love the idea. Don't you think he bought it to turn it into an unchallenged sewer of far right rhetoric?
And so yeah, but that's
and by leaving, you help him.
No, because by leaving, you leave them to talk to themselves.
Yes, but they believe the riots are happening because people believe what they're seeing on there. So if there are no people there to tell them that it's not true, you get more riots.
No, the people who are on there, at the very least, you're helping the police identify people by removing yourself from it, and then they can see that this platform is full of people who are racist and far right.
Yeah.
And that way, you know, I just think it's time to move. You know, it's time to evolve.
Yeah, I do understand the point that you're making, and maybe I've got an unconscious bias because I don't know, enjoying it isn't quite the right word. But it is the right word. I enjoy it, and I don't want to give up that enjoyment. But I don't think I have got that unconscious bias. I think if you had 1.2 million followers and were widely regarded as doing good on there, then your decision to leave would be of a very different complexion from, with respect, what it was when you did it. Especially, and I don't want to reference that Reuters research again, but when you kind of think, well, why on earth would I stay? And the answer would be because you're influential. And your influence is the polar opposite of the influences that offend you so much, Sarah. So why wouldn't you want people who are currently more powerful on social media than all of the racist liars that we've been talking about all morning, are currently more powerful than all of them? Why would I surrender the field to them? I don't know. As I say, maybe there's a bit of unconscious bias going on. Sundus is in Edinburgh. Sundus, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. And it was just to note that although it was reported by a few media outlets that it was as early as yesterday, the First Minister, John Swinney, and Justice Secretary Angela Constance actually visited Central Mosque in Edinburgh yesterday.
Okay.
So they met with the Imam and the representatives of the Scottish Refugee Council and the Muslim Council of Scotland. Obviously, Swinney's intention was to show solidarity with Muslims in Scotland after the far-right riots. They are riots, not protests, in England and obviously Northern Ireland over the weekend. But just to note, and obviously just kind of...
So you're challenging our friend in Paisley, who thinks it's just a bit of luck, really, that has seen Scotland spared the sort of scenes that the rest of us have been enduring all week.
It's not luck at all. There's very much, Scotland is not immune to these riots, and there very much are riots planned. As I say, they're not protests, they are riots. Just to note that there was one planned for a war cenotaph at Glasgow Central Mosque on Saturday. It didn't materialise as far as I know, because these people are cowards. The community within Scotland, and certainly where I am in Edinburgh and Glasgow and kind of surrounding areas, it's very close-knit in terms of if something happens, certainly as kind of like a positive consequence of what's been going on every week in terms of the Palestine protests. There is a sense of community there to protect others who are more vulnerable, whether it's, women or older people or people of colour or everyone, anyone that is targeted by these xenophobic people. We are looking out for each other, and there are a number of organisations, community groups and individuals who are ready to protect mosques in locations which have already been put up on social media platforms. So there are things, I'm conscious of not advertising the organisation that will probably revel in the fact that we're talking about...
No, and equally conscious of the fact that you could be proved wrong by the weekend, couldn't you?
Yeah, potentially, but there are counter-protests in the process of being organised. They are being organised, and they have been advertised on social, so that includes this weekend and Friday. Scotland...
There's a different vibe, I think, in Scotland. You're not... Yeah, I do. I mean, certainly, when we talk about things on the programme, and it's pointed out to me by listeners that what I'm saying about Britain casually and lazily doesn't actually apply in Scotland, where for relatively banal examples, you'd be looking at prescription charges or things like that. But the vibe is slightly different because you haven't had the same sort of right-wing print media that we've had south of the border. There's a reason why even the Daily Mail has a different front page from the one in Edinburgh from the one it has in London.
Yeah, that is true. But then there's another side of it, which is, silence is complicity when it comes to certain things that are underreported. For example, we look at there's a local paper in Edinburgh called the Edinburgh Evening News who never report in a positive way about Palestinian protests. And this has been going on every week, even when we've had hundreds and more than hundreds, in fact, thousands of people coming to these protests. They underreport it, that it's not positively. If anything, it's not reported on at all. And if we look at the weekly Palestinian protests in Edinburgh and Scotland, almost every protest that we've had, I've witnessed people being physically assaulted and people swearing, being racist. I myself have been assaulted. I've had my megaphone broken.
Yes.
Had a racist person pounce on me, and various other individuals have had that racist treatment for members of the public every week. And that kind of thing just gets totally underreported. And then there are various instances where people have lied about there being incidents that have been perpetrated by, pro-Palestinian kind of protesters. And that has been reported on instantly without any kind of confirmation of what's happened. And then, we find out later it's been debunked. So although, I absolutely agree with you on the point that, there's certainly more visible racism within England, and I've experienced it when I lived there. I studied in London, but certainly in Edinburgh, I would say it's underground in the sense of it's maybe more subtle, but there are very much explicit examples every weekend while I'm protesting, while others are protesting the Palestinian protest. And it's a shame because, we've actually had to fight with the police for them to take action against that. As early as last week, we had a quite prominent Palestinian
I feel we've gone a little bit off the track, and I was waiting for a pause in the conversation so that I could interrupt, but I sense there isn't going to be one.
Oh, well, yeah, you never know. But yeah,
and I'm 3 minutes late for the final break of the programme as well. So, I mean, the double standards with regards to reporting of the Palestinian protest and reporting of the race riots in Rotherham is off the flipping charts. But and that is a problem that is as happens in Edinburgh and Glasgow as much as it happens in London. I mean, the idea that you describe a hate march when there is next to no criminality unfolding and say nothing about police being bombarded and hotels being set on fire by people who presumably think that they've got a similar opinion on immigration to the people who describe the Palestinian as the protests as hate marches. But as I say, I was beginning to lose your thread there, and I'm paid to pay attention. It's 12:48. It is 12:51, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's go to Stoke-on-Trent, which has had its share of troubles this week. Zagam is there. Zagam, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Long-time fan, first-time caller.
Thank you.
Yes, so I'm the son of two Muslim immigrants from Sri Lanka, both doctors. So they came here just before I was born in 2004. And we've been having conversations over the last couple of days. I mean, even this morning we said, is it going to be safe for us to go to the mosque on Friday? Things like that.
Have you had conversations like that before?
No, never.
Because there was the attack, again, by someone who turned out to be a Stephen Yaxley Lennon fan. There was the murderous attack on the mosque in Finsbury Park, but that felt like, please God, it felt like a one-off, didn't it? Whereas this week has felt like a much bigger problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel a bit silly because I've spent the last sort of few years arguing with my parents and sort of saying, this is not a racist country, and they've always said to me, it's there, you just haven't experienced it yet, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, gosh. How old are you? Do you mind if I ask, how old are you? Did you tell me?
19.
Yeah, you did. 19. So you've grown up thinking that...
Grown up in this country, very, very proud to be British. I owe lots of, everything in my life to this country. I get rinsed at university for having a British flag hanging up in my room. But over the last few days... That is
a tiny bit weird at university. I've got nothing against flags, but, you're supposed to have a picture of Marilyn Monroe on your wall or something like that, or James Dean. Yeah. I'm showing my age. So your mum and dad would say to you, you're being a bit naive, darling. It is there. It is under the... Right, gosh. And now you know they were right.
Well,
or not.
I still do think it's a small minority of people, and as all my friends have there's counter protests back at university and stuff like that. There is people fighting against this, so I think it remains a small minority of people, but it's symptomatic of an undercurrent. I think perhaps I was a bit naive of, but I still want people to think that they can be proud of this country and that's not representative of being British.
Beautifully put. Are you going to go to mosque on Friday?
We'll see. Looking like no at the moment.
Because of fears of protest, riots.
Because we live in an area with, I think Reform came second in the last election. That's sort of symptomatic of the sort of people. We have big Muslim population and big, I guess, the kind of opposite force. So there could be issues definitely this week. I think there's a protest planned at an immigration centre tomorrow. So it's stuff like that.
Keep your head down and just hope that it soon passes.
Indeed, yeah.
You're a good man, Zagam.
Thank you.
No, I don't know why I said that. It's a really interesting story that you tell about, and your patriotism shines through. Up to and including the slightly odd deployment of a flag in your university room. And I'm only siding with your mates who tease you about it. I'm not in any way malign. Even I have to say stuff like this now because of online liars pretending to have heard things that they haven't heard. I say, I'm not maligning the flag in any way. I'm just suggesting, as all of Zagam's fellow students do, that it's a slightly odd thing for a 19-year-old university student to have on their wall. But more power to you. And I like that. I like that. As with a couple of earlier callers, those sort of glimmers of optimism that emerge from the swamp as we see it. 12:54. It's why we do what we do every day. I may even read out some of the messages that drive that point home, but I think my little Reuters-based interlude has probably used up my showing off quotient for the day. 12:55 is the time. David's in the East Midlands. That's not very specific. David, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Yes, David here, and first-time caller, a bit nervous and a bit emotional.
It's only me. Carry on, Dave. We haven't got long, so I'll try very hard not to interrupt you and almost certainly fail.
In the pulse of the night, a love ignites, burning bright. No escape, no retreat. In this madness, hearts beat. Through the chaos, we collide. A wild passion we can't hide. Lost in moments, lost in time. In this frenzy so sublime. Endless frenzy, no way out. In this love we twist and shout. No control, just you and me. Fighting wild insanity.
No, I just want to say that I'm 61 years of age and I was born in the 60s and I'm mixed race. Mum's English white and my father's from the Caribbean.
Okay.
And I've never lived in England and felt so depressed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Tell me, do you want to tell me why? What are you feeling? I mean, it might be not a silly question, but tell me anyway what it is you're depressed about.
Well, I'm depressed about, the way the media and the politicians have just overlooked the underbelly, the undercurrent of racism that's been building up in this country for years. I kind of foresaw what was going to happen before the EU election. I mean, before the EU referendum.
Right.
And I did say that if politicians don't get a grip with immigration, if they don't realise that people are so unhappy with immigration, the amount of people coming into the country, undercutting their wages, etc., and no integration that was, being forced on people.
You're an example of integration.
I am, but I grew up on a housing estate in the 60s, and
we've got a Muslim mayor of London. Integration in this country is arguably the best in the world.
Well, you could say that, but
I do say that because I can see it in front of me.
Yeah, and I see it as well. I mean, my partner's white, my ex-wife is white, and my mum is white. So my friends were white. So there was.
So the problem is, and I think we're probably on slightly different pages here, but they needed to say things like that about immigration in order to get their Brexit over the line. But of course, once people started leaving, the holes that were left in our workforce became intolerable, and therefore the invitation to people from other parts of the world, in this case an awful lot of people coming in from India and Nigeria and other countries like that, had to be sent out. But the people who told people that voting for Brexit would cut immigration could never come out and tell the truth about that, David. That's the real problem here, is that privately they all know, all the proper politicians know that it's absolutely necessary, but publicly they keep insisting that it needs to be stopped. And that creates this kind of emotional turmoil that you find yourself in this afternoon.
Absolutely, and I just think it's going to get worse and worse now. I don't think the Labour Party, the Labour government, can do anything about it now.
Well, it could start telling the truth. That would help. It could start explaining the necessity of our demographics and the fact that as we have an ageing population that is going to need increasing levels of social and medical care, as we have industries that are holed below the waterline by an exodus of staff and an absolute inability to hire new people, as we got health problems affecting 4.5 million people that could perhaps be addressed by a more compassionate approach to mental and physical health, then things might improve. But they certainly didn't show much in campaigning that suggests that they're going to grasp that particular nettle. And whether the events of this week wake them up to the urgency of what I describe, or whether it makes them retreat ever further into a sort of mealy-mouthed appeasement, only time will tell. David, you take care, mate. Thank you for the call. It's 12:59. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. So download Global Player for free. We forgot to play the full disclosure clip. It's one of my favourite ever. It's Wednesday tomorrow. It's one of my favourite ever full disclosures. There's no PMQs tomorrow. I'll do a longer clip. Download Global Player for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. But now, standing in for Sheila Fogarty, it's Vanessa Phil. 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 It's Vanessa Phil.